Jeff, what's up, man? Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Hey, man, it is great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I think this is an important conversation. There's a lot of guys that ask about, concealed carry and what they should be carrying and what kind of training they should be doing. And unfortunately, I wish this wasn't the case, but it seems to me like it's becoming more and more necessary than it was even just 2, 3, 5 years ago.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, just the amount of new gun owners. So it's an interesting time period, that's for sure. I mean, obviously with everything happening, but there's been a lot of folks that were like agnostic about guns. They
Hmm.
didn't really have a good or bad opinion of them. They were right in the middle of the road. And with everything that's been happening, all the crazy, the stay at home, the shortage of resources, and then the rioting, there's been a huge jump of people that were like, yeah, I don't really have a choice. I don't have a really, positive, negative opinion of it. But now they're all like, I need to have a gun and I need to start learning how to use it. So I think that was like an unintended. I don't think the left was really thinking it was going to work out well, but it really worked out well for us because a lot of those folks that were on the fence are now really diving into the world.
Yeah, I think it's important. You actually mentioned something you said, which I like and I appreciate. They said also that they need to get trained on it. It seems to me that there's a lot of people who think that just because they own a tool, like a firearm, for example, that somehow they're safer. In fact, I might argue that not only are they not safer just because they have it, they might actually subject themselves to greater danger if they're not trained with it.
Well, you got the first off, just you got to respect the lethality of the weapon, just like any other power tool. If not used correctly, it can cause injury or death.
Right.
And I that's a big mental shift for a lot of people. They don't really associate. I mean, some of them do, but I think a good majority of them don't really recognize the destructive capabilities of the firearm. So we run into a lot of just accidents, things that were avoidable had they followed just some very simple safety rules, had a higher level of respect for the firearm. So if if we could have that happen, that would be huge because that's the last thing that we want is for anybody, particularly new to this industry, having an accident, injuring themselves or injuring a loved one.
Right.
And then to get to your point about education, it is unfortunate that is so many of the folks that are looking to purchase a firearm is that they just, I don't want to say that they don't value training. I think what it was, like at least in my observations early on in the year, like in April, when the stay-at-home orders came in play, we had a huge surge of purchases. And what we were expecting was like after the resource shortage passed and everybody was back to normal, that a lot of those folks that bought guns were going to be like, you know what, I really am second guessing this purchase. I think I should go ahead and get rid of it.
Hmm.
And then the riots happened. And so now all of a sudden people are like, wait a minute, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea after all. So there's a lot of those folks that bought the firearm and they wanted to have it just to have. And they're like, that was a big decision for them. I mean, a lot of those folks, again, were agnostic and it's like, no. But now they had to actually confront the fact that they needed a firearm and they're just getting comfortable with it. Like the fact that they actually have a firearm in their home.
Right.
And that's taken some adjusting for a lot of them to get used to it.
I mean,
And
I know
then
it
we
did
hope,
for me because when I grew up, I mean, firearms weren't a thing for us. There was no firearms in the house. There was, no exposure to firearms. I never shot a firearm until I was probably 14, 15 years old.
wow,
So that I remember that first time that I held a pistol. It was a scary thing, right? Because I just did not have that exposure to it. And I remember my stepfather, me saying, I'm a little nervous. And he's like, good. That's the proper response. If you aren't nervous about this, then there's something wrong. You should be nervous because it is a very, like you said, powerful tool that can create some severe and uh, life consequences.
oh, it's so true. Like, I love that. Like that anxiety is good. That nervousness is good because when it's properly channeled, it shows a degree of respect and, maybe not respect, maybe more of caution. Like I need to be careful about what I'm doing. I need to be paying attention. I need to know or
Right.
understand what I'm doing. I just don't want to be willy nilly. So I do think that's valuable. It also works very well because if folks maintain that mindset, they will hopefully continue to treat the firearm with the respect that it is it is needed to be safe in their home, because that's my biggest
Safe and
worry.
effective too, right?
Well, that's the thing. Like I talk about this from like different tiers. So just to put it in perspective for a lot of folks that may not be paying attention, there's a recent study conducted that showed that right now, as of I think the end of August, there are 5 million new gun owners. So 5 million people that hadn't owned a gun before now own one.
As in just this year?
Yes.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know.
Yeah, that's a huge increase.
It's a monster. It's a huge monster. And so with those, and there's no way that I have to, there's nowhere I can point to say, okay, this is the ratio that you should think about. But this is what my experience has shown me. More than half of that 5 million bought the firearm and maybe bought a box of ammunition and put all of that in a drawer, in a closet, in a foot locker of some sort. You know, they just don't really have any intention of going out and using it. Then out of the remaining, half, there's a half of that is interested, and they bought the gun and the ammo, and they went and they shot the ammo, and then they put it in the drawer, foot locker, closet. And then below that, another half of that figure, they decided that, bought a gun, bought the ammo, shot the gun. I think I'm going to get my license to carry. I think I'm going to go out and actually get licensed so that I can carry this, because now things are a little crazy. And then the last little group, which is the smallest group, is the group that bought the gun, bought the ammo, shot the gun, got their license, and now are like, I need to learn more. I need to understand more about this. So, it's basically, a big net that was thrown out there. But, my hope is that smaller group of individuals that are interested in learning and getting better will grow, that they'll tell their friends, that they'll tell their family, that they'll encourage other people in their circles that, this is probably something that you should consider. So that's kind of what my hope is that we see that, because right there, what we're looking at is we're looking at an ideological shift. I mean, to be honest, this is not a trend anymore. We are well past the trend. This is like, we've exhausted resources as far as firearms are concerned. I don't know if people realize that, but there's like no guns available right now.
Yeah.
I was just at my local gun store, and there's a handful. I shouldn't say that, but there's like just a handful. I don't want to start a panic there, of firearms left available. And some of them are, maybe some of the topper end, well-known brands. And then the rest are just whatever you can get. And that's kind of where we're at right now. Just the volume of purchasing craze that happened here over the last 6 months.
Yeah, I noticed this even just it was years ago. I remember you couldn't even get your hands on 22, for example. And so I think we're running into a similar situation. You have supply and demand, but that lags, right? It lags behind. And so the demand wasn't there. The demand happened immediately. We didn't have the supply to be able to deal with it, and now we're running into the supply issues on the back end of it. It'll all level itself out at some point, but yeah, it's a scary time if you are interested in purchasing a firearm and you can't get your hands on one right now.
It really is. Like, all of a sudden, think about it. Just so put it in perspective in some sense. For a lot of those folks that were in the middle of the road, just the fact they had to start talking about, I need to go out and buy a gun, and then they finally make that decision through a lot of rational thought. They finally, all right, I'm going to go out and buy a gun. And then they go out, and now they can't find anything. So it's like, it's so frustrating. I feel terrible for them, because, that wasn't an easy decision for them to make. That took some soul searching to come up with that final decision. And then they make all that effort, and now they really can't find a lot. Now, every place is a little different. Some regions are doing better than others, but in general, across the board, I feel like it's a difficult time. Like my son just turned 21, the legal age here to purchase his first handgun. And we've been waiting to get it. We've just got word. It's taken us like 6-7 weeks to finally get it in stock for us. So
yeah. So get on it now is what you're saying. If you're interested even remotely in the next, before the new year, or even into the first quarter of new year, you better start getting on it now.
I couldn't emphasize that enough. And here's the thing. It's a hard thing, because a lot of these folks are coming into this industry where they have no knowledge. They don't know what's right or wrong, what's good or bad. And so my recommendation to them is, number one, we're living, this time period is unprecedented. So you might find a firearm that seems a little bit more pricier, and it is pricier because, again, of the the law of supply and demand.
Sure.
Resources are in short supply, so it's going to be a little bit pricier. When you if you make it to a gun store that has inventory and you find a name brand product that you're interested in, my recommendation is don't try to go and do bargain shopping someplace else. Don't try to do compare shopping. Don't try to come home and think about it.
It's going to be gone.
It's going to be gone. I'm telling you, it will be.
Yeah.
You gotta, so, if you've committed to it, like no pun intended, but when you get there and you find that one that at least meets some sort of requirements for your needs, then go ahead and pull the trigger and purchase the firearm.
Right. Right. And you can always look and expand and change and tweak and things like that down the road when there's a larger supply, but just making sure that you're prepared. I think there's another disconnect people have too. And, even me who has some training, not a lot, but some firearms training, I look at guys like yourself and those in the firearms industry, and you see these guys and they're out at the range all day, every day. They're spending thousands and thousands of dollars on different components of the firearm, thousands of dollars and thousands of rounds of ammunition. And the average citizen is thinking, well, I've got a job and I don't have thousands of dollars of disposable income, and I don't have a range or a property anywhere near me. And so it's not only is it a frustration in purchasing the firearm, it's like, now what do I do? And so they just bury it in the drawer and they never use it because what do you do? Like, they don't have the access to the resources that maybe somebody else might.
It's true. And I sympathize with them because it's like I said, it's unprecedented times. And my suggestion, my advice to those folks is, we all have our own life responsibilities that we have to manage every day. And this may not be a priority at the moment. And I can completely appreciate it because, just getting food on the table for a lot of people is a
Right.
challenge these days.
Sure.
So try not to get too, don't be, I guess the best way I can put it is, when you see something like that happening on YouTube, don't naturally assume that you don't throw your hands up in the air and say, oh crap, I can't do this because I don't have the time. I don't have the treasure. I don't have the talent. It's like that all is time. This is a marathon and not a sprint. You're not gonna turn into a killer commando overnight because you watched a couple of YouTube videos.
People probably think they do.
Well, I have yet to seen it, but I mean,
no, I'm just saying, I think it's funny because people, and I think this is more generally true for men, is that we overestimate our abilities when it comes to picking up a firearm or self-defense or emergency preparedness. So we think because we watched Rambo or because we played Grand Theft Auto when we were growing up, that all of a sudden it's like, oh, you just pick it up and point it. And like you said, you're a commando now.
I got to share this one little story with you. It's hilarious. Since you mentioned Grand Theft Auto, I taught a class. I don't remember where it was at. And I had a fairly young student, probably mid-20s. And they get done with the class and they did okay, but they clearly didn't do as good as they were thinking. And at the end, we're packing up, we're leaving, and he comes up to me and he's like, man, I just wanted to tell you something. I'm like, yeah, what you got? And he's like, this was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I did so well on video games. Like, I thought this was going to be easy. I'm like a professional game player, and I suck at this in reality. And I'm like,
that's a scary thing, though, man. Like, somebody
it
actually
opened my
think
eyes.
that. That's what I'm saying. For somebody to actually think that and express that with sincerity, like they weren't joking. That's a scary thing, man.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
There's a lot of people feeling that way.
I had to kind of like take a moment to like process that. I'm like, wow. And then I had to try to respond in a manner that was, that wasn't going to crush his dreams, but at least encourage him to keep going. And I was like, it is. It's a technical skill that requires, practice. So you got to get out there. I'm sure you didn't learn how to ride a bike by playing a game that taught you how to ride a bike. So
right. What would you recommend to somebody who maybe they've purchased their first firearm or they're getting into it and they're going to purchase a firearm, as far as a time commitment on a weekly basis or a monthly basis for training, and what sort of exercises can they engage in as just an average, ordinary guy like myself who's not at the range all day, every day?
Sure. First of all, it's a great question. I love that question. And, As far as a commitment is concerned, I feel like if you can, like, it's clear that we're in a time period where ammo is also difficult to get. So we have to
Right.
figure out other ways that we can practice and train. And there are some other tools out there. They're dummy rounds, inert training rounds. They're designed to simulate loading and unloading and functioning of the firearm without actually firing the firearm. I think that's a great investment. You can go on Amazon and find those. They're plastic. They're consumable items. You can learn how to load and unload your firearm in a very safe manner because they're inert. They're not going to. There's no risk of going bang. So, like, just becoming more familiar with the operation of your firearm is like step one. Like, read the manual, invest in some training, like those inert training rounds. And then practice loading, unloading, become familiar with all the features, all the buttons and levers that you have on your firearm so that you understand how that works. I mean, that's something that you can do in the privacy of your home. You don't have to go to the range to learn how to do all of that. And you probably don't want to because that's valuable time at the range. Time, talents, and treasures are they're always restricted. So take the opportunity, do that at home. And then there's a kind of like a format that's called dry fire. And what dry fire is, you got live fire, which is where you're expending ammunition, you're shooting ammunition. And dry fire is where you're not. And what you're doing is you're going through the motions. So it's like if you were like, a lot of folks can relate to this. You might have some Olympic lifting in your background. And so when you're starting off, before you get to the heavy weights or your workout weights, you probably are working with an empty bar. And the empty bar is just designed to help you learn the bar path, kind of remember all the things,
Muscle memory, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Just trying to get the juices flowing. So dry fire is kind of the same way. It's like you're working with an empty bar. You have no live ammunition of any sort, and all you're doing is you're going through the various things with, like, the most basics, like how to properly grip the gun, and then you go through sight management, trigger management. There's no recoil, obviously, because the gun is not firing, but you can still gain a lot of value from that. And that's free. That's something you can do in the privacy of your own home. I do recommend that you follow the recommended, best practices for dry fire, which there's dozens of videos online that you can Google and find out how to do it safely. And then if you can invest, I would say if you can invest, like, maybe once a week, if you can invest 10 or 15 minutes, that's huge. I mean, there's nothing stopping that. That's easy. You go start a cup of coffee and you go in there and you start your safety protocol and you do your dry fire, you come back out, your coffee's ready. So it's like, it's a little bit easier than some might think to work in the conditions that we have right now and gain a lot of value, because once this passes us and, everything returns to normal, you will have invested a lot of time in actually covering some of the bases that you don't want to waste time at the range doing. Like, you can do a lot of this on your own.
Or find yourself in a difficult circumstance and not be adequately prepared for it.
Right. And at the very least, you've had some familiarity with the firearm, because that's another concern that folks have, is like, they don't understand how the gun works. They don't understand like all of the things. And that's where a lot of accidents happen, is because they're pushing the wrong button or moving the wrong lever. It turns out that, the gun goes bang. So the more familiar you are with that firearm, the less likely you are to experience one of those types of accidents. And that's a huge thing. So at the very least, if you learn how to properly load the firearm, if you keep the firearm in your home for home defense, there's a lot of different thoughts on, do I keep it loaded? Do I keep it unloaded? Do I keep it, secure in a lockbox, or do I keep it out and available? There's a lot of thought that needs to go into that. But at the very least, if you need to grab the firearm, load the firearm in defense of life, you will at least have that information, and that kind of lowers that anxiety level a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I even think about when it comes to muscle memory, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's been a long time since, I went through like basic training and my rifle training, but it was like, tap, rack, bang, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
If you like these little trigger points that help you remember, okay, this is how I clear a jam. But if you don't have that stuff conditioned or trained,
so true.
You're going to, what do I do? You're going to be looking at, you don't have time to look at it. You don't have time to eject the magazine and figure and analyze everything. You've got to make quick decisions. In fact, you don't want them to be decisions. You want them to be reactions based on what you've trained.
And that's why, everything from like, okay, well, what if small capacity magazine, like what if I have a small capacity 6 rounds and I go through those 6 rounds, dry fire practicing, loading the gun will help expedite that reloading of the gun, if you will, so that, you're just that much ahead of the power curve. So, I mean, like yeah, it sucks. We don't have a lot of ammo. There's not a lot of range availability. Ranges are becoming harder and harder. All sorts of craziness happening there. But there's still a lot that everybody can do, regardless of, like, my skill level. I still do a lot of dry fire practice. And, a lot of times people think or associate dry fire as like beginner, like, oh, it's only for the beginners. I'm not a beginner anymore. And man, that's the biggest mistake that you can make, because, like you were saying, dry fire is so incredibly valuable because it's helping us to really reinforce those neural pathways that create that muscle memory that you're describing. And so when folks can get like ahead of the power curve on some of that stuff, it's just going to make, when they can go to the range, that much more valuable.
Right.
You're actually spending it. You're spending quality time there. Not that the operation of the firearm isn't quality, but it's not something that requires you to be at the range to do.
Right. Yeah, and I like that you're talking about the fundamentals. I look at professional baseball players as an example. If you go to a game or you go to practice or spring training, you're going to see these athletes, the pinnacle of their careers. And what are they doing? They're taking soft toss. They're hitting off a tee. Like, they're doing the exact same things that my 6-year-old son is doing as he's learning to play baseball. It's the fundamentals, it's the principles, and you need to establish those and get so good at those so that you can excel in these other areas.
So it's a funny thing, because I kind of joke about this a little bit. Like, there's no such thing as advanced gunfight. And basically there's a phrase, a mantra, if you will. The secret of winning is simple: master the fundamentals and then execute them faster than the bad guy. And that's really all we're trying to do here. Like, everybody wants to think that there's this high speed killer commando stuff that they want to learn. And truth be told, we spend a tremendous amount of time on accuracy fundamentals, because that's what wins fights, is accuracy. It's sure, it's important to be fast, but you can't shoot fast enough to make up a miss. So
right.
the accuracy is the key component. And
I think I saw a quote just the other day, and quotes, you never know who to attribute them to, but I think it was from Wyatt Earp is what it was attributed to. And he says, fast is good, but accuracy is deadly, right? So,
it's so true. And I tell that to everybody. It's like, accuracy, rules supreme on the battlefield. That's what wins gunfights, is the accurate rounds on target. So it's like those fundamentals, the only thing that changes, if people really wanted to dive into it, the only thing that changes is that when you're watching like a competitive shooter or a really good veteran seasoned operator, what you're seeing there is years and years of practicing the basics that they're just able to execute at such a higher speed than the average person, because it's instinctive, it's intuitive. They're almost not even thinking. It's like so reflexive in a sense. And that's where speed comes into, but without the basic foundation, without the principles that you described, it just is sloppy. It's just sloppy. It's all over the place. And maybe, you never really want to be lucky in a gunfight. You want to be good. And then whatever luck you generate is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, you'll take it, right? You'll take
exactly.
it.
I'm not going to turn it down.
You don't want to rely on it.
I don't want to approach a gunfight thinking I'm lucky. I want to approach the gunfight knowing that I'm good.
I saw that you had these little cards. I think they're just training cards. Essentially, it's like a deck of cards. Is there dry fire drills in those deck of cards, or is that all
there
live fire
absolutely
stuff?
Is. No. So that's the TACOS training program is what you're describing. And that is each of those. So that, like, there's a pistol version, a rifle version, and there's a training tool out there called a CERT pistol. And it's made by a good friend of mine named Mike Hughes. Basically what it is, it looks like a pistol frame that fires when you pull the trigger. It has a laser that is emitted. It's a great tool.
Oh, right.
But not everybody,
I've seen them.
Yeah, not everybody needs one. So the pistol and the rifle versions are the most popular ones, and they have 4 suits, just like a regular deck of cards. One suit is about speed, one suit is about accuracy, one suit is about baselines, and then one suit is about dry fire. And there's various dry fire drills, some of which we've talked about in that training program. And the beautiful thing about that training program is that the reason why I created it was, after classes, I would get students that would approach me and go, hey, what do I practice to stay good? What do I practice to get better? And they're looking for drills. They're looking for something that they can do. And it's like, everybody's a little different, so it's hard to give good advice across the board. So what I did was, my training program is built around my performance. So I'll go and I'll shoot a cold assessment drill of some sort, like no warm up, just, hey, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And usually the drill is somewhat comprehensive. So it evaluates a couple of different moving parts, and then I'll look and see, okay, well, I really sucked at this. And then I'll create my training program to help work on that, what I sucked at. And so what I did was I took that training program and I supplemented it into a deck of cards. And it's hugely popular. I love how people are using them, and they're the nice thing about it is it's scalable to your skill level, so you don't have to worry about whether or not you're elite, advanced. Beginner shooters are going to gain a lot from it, because it's going to, the most valuable thing, particularly now with ammo being so scarce, is that you can create a training plan. So when you go to the range, every round you fire is fired with a purpose. Like
Everything counts. Yeah.
Everyone counts. Exactly. And you can also keep score, because it gives you the grading metrics that allow you to take that drill, whatever card, ace of spades, you shot it. It allows you to kind of figure out what your score is so that you can document that, which I encourage people, if you're really looking at, anything that of value is measurable. So we want to measure our progress and track it over time. And so you can keep that in your logbook. In fact, earlier this morning, I was at the range with my son, and I had him create a training program, and we went and we shot it. And I kind of gave him some tips on, here's what you need to look at. Here's how you do this. And I showed him how I track all my metrics so that I can kind of keep track of my progress. So it's funny we're talking about this, because I literally just did this morning.
Yeah.
And it really helps folks to, especially folks that are new, it allows them to kind of expand their knowledge base without really feeling intimidated by the industry and worried about like I don't know what I'm doing per se. It's okay. I mean, I didn't know. I tell people this all the time. Like, I did not know how to shoot very well for a very long time. It took me a while to get to where I'm at. So I can sympathize with you as far as not knowing everything. I mean, you shouldn't feel. I know it's easy for me to say this. You shouldn't feel bad that you don't know everything, and it's okay to not know everything. What hopefully you do is you take that kind of drive to want to know things, that you want to go out there and learn, and you want to go out and discover, and you want to go out and experience. And I think the training cards do a really good job of helping people to kind of at least get started. They'll carry you through, especially during this time period. I didn't even realize that, but it's incredibly valuable right now. They'll carry you through this time period very well. So just make your, what limited ammo that you have that much more valuable.
Yeah, I like that. And what you're talking about too, when you're talking about going out and trying that thing and being out there, is also dropping the ego. And I know, again, this is very generally, I think, more true for men than it is for women, is that we're driven by ego. So I don't want to go out there on the range with a seasoned professional like yourself, because then I run the risk of looking foolish. Well, yeah, but that's actually kind of the point. And it's the only way to get better, is to go learn from somebody who is far superior at that skill than you are.
Man, I'll tell you what, I've studied this for a long time, and there's two fears, if you will, within the shooting industry. There's a fear of not knowing and the fear of the unknown. The fear of the unknown is typically more of a female kind of emotion. The fear of the unknown, they're not sure what to expect, and so therefore they're kind of hesitant.
Right.
And the fear of not knowing is mainly guys. Like, there's a lot of guys that they don't want to look bad in front of their peers. They don't want to embarrass themselves or be ridiculed or criticized. Mm-hmm. And man, that is such it's tough, because we see that a lot. And it unfortunately, it hinders your growth. It really kind of stunts your growth. I mean, I'm sure you've stepped into a CrossFit gym, and, a couple of them have, like a big, bold banner over the door says, leave your ego at the door.
Right.
And I try to tell people, like, when you're training, don't compare yourself to somebody next to you. Don't compare yourself to me. Don't try to come in there thinking that I've got to be better than the next guy next to me. The only thing you have to do is you have to put the effort in to improve yourself. You're not in a competition with anybody else on the line, unless it is a competition.
Sure.
But for the most part, you're just there to try and learn. And you can turn that fear of not knowing into an asset. Like, I try regularly to expose myself to things that I don't really know a lot about or understand. And I do it in a lot of different ways. It's not as complicated as some people think. Learn how to, I don't know how to play a musical instrument. So I will sometimes dabble in that and just try to figure out, okay, because I'm not interested so much in learning to play the musical instrument. I'm interested in learning about the process of learning to play the musical instrument.
Interesting.
how can that, because the way I look at it is that will help me to be a better instructor by connecting better, more efficiently with the various students that I get, because everybody learns differently. So if I can expand my learning base on how I learn and what works for me, what works for other people, it's just helping me to be a better instructor. But it is also very enriching. You kind of like, that's cool. I mean, it's like life is way too short to get stuck in one rut. I prefer to try to tackle a lot of new ththings, and most of the time I have more balls in the air than I can handle, and plenty of them get dropped. But I still try to I just try to value the experience and value what it's brought to me. What is it taught me? And I've always tried to get across to the students that failure is a gift. You want to be failing. In our classes, they encourage you to push yourself to the point where you are failing. As long as you're safe as you're doing it, pushing yourself to failure is incredibly valuable, because it's helping you to establish new limits. It's pushing your boundaries. It's getting you, like we had a saying in the teams that, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Right. And when you can appreciate that, and when you can push yourself past those boundaries, failure is no longer a bad thing. It's like, it's a good thing, because you're pushing yourself. You want to figure out how far you can go before the wheels come off. And like, I try to get that through, and 70% successful. Some folks it's really hard for them to get to that place, but others can really appreciate it, because as soon as they get past that fear of failure, it's like, I don't care anymore. Right. And all of a sudden it's like this
unlocks everything.
Exactly. It does. Yes. It's like a floodgate. Poof. It opens wide, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, all this information is coming right at me. It's hugely valuable.
I think for me, it's because I've recognized this in myself, and knowing where my ego is driving my decisions and my behaviors. And one thing that has really flipped a switch for me is, and when I know that I'm doing it right, is when I'm asking a lot of questions. Like, I've noticed people who don't ask questions, either two things: they feel like they know it all, or they don't want to look stupid.
Yeah, it's so true.
And both are a problem. Both are
bad. And I try to tell the students, the best question that you can ask is why. Why? Why are you doing something? Why do you have to do it this way? Why do you have to do that? Why are you doing this? Because if you can understand the why, that gives you buy-in, and that buy-in is hugely valuable for a new student. So when I'm talking to, and I would tell people, like, if you can't understand the why, it's going to be hard for you to accept that. It's going to be hard for you to appreciate what it is that you're learning. You're going through the motions, in other words, and that's not a bad thing. I'm not going to diss that, but when you can really appreciate the why, it's going to be far more valuable, because what you're learning is going to mean something. It's going to have value to you. And
I think knowing the why will also help you bend the rules a little bit, or maybe a better way to say it would be to adapt, to become a little bit more creative, because you know why you're doing something. So you can start to see, okay, well, this would be an exception to that rule, or in this particular scenario, we do it that way, but that won't work because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to have to do it a different way. So it allows you to be more creative and more effective in a multiple scenarios and prospects you might be up against.
I can remember, I was going to a class. I was a young frogman, and I was in this class, and I remember that the instructor was getting really annoyed with me because I didn't understand a lot of the stuff, and I kept asking a lot of questions, like why? And he took it as an affront. Like, he thought that I was being disrespectful or a jerk or what. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I remember at the end of the day, like second, third day, 'cause, I mean, that stuff was just going over my head. It was like bomb shit. Yeah. And I'm like,
it's just why? A fire hose of information. And
yes, sure. Exactly. And like, my C daddy, he kind of like really set me on the right path. And he was like, if you can't come back to the command and brief me on why you did that, why you did this, then you failed. If you can't if you can't bring that information back to us, the collective, and share that information and understand the why so that you can share the why with us, then you failed. And I was like, oh, I don't want to fail. There was that word back then. Like, as a young frogman, I would do anything to avoid failing, whatever it was. And so if I didn't understand it absolutely, I would sit there and ask the why. And so at the end of like the second or third day, the guy pulls me aside, like at a break, and he's like, he's perturbed, obviously. And I'm young. I'm like early mid 20s ish kind of thing. And I'm just like Jojo the monkey boy, like, tell me more, tell me more. Like, and he kind of got on me, and I was like, I was put off by it. I was like, I don't understand. It does not compute. I'm supposed to understand everything. You're supposed to, like, your job, the only reason why you exist right now is to improve my lethality on the battlefield. Right. That's it. Like, I need to understand the why. And if you can't give it to me, then somebody else has to. And I remember, like, I mentioned it to him, like, if I can't take this information back to my command and share it, then I'm no good to my teammates. And he kind of took a step back, and like I was getting worried, like, oh shit, he's not going to share anymore. He's like going to take his toys and go home. And I was like, oh shit, I can't go back to the command and not know what the hell I'm doing. And so he kind of like had a change of heart after he took the time to pull me aside, and after I explained to him, hey man, I truly don't know what the fuck I'm doing. And that's why I'm asking these questions, because I don't get it. It's not like I'm trying to be mean to you. I really don't get it. And I need to understand this, because if I can't share, if I can't explain this to my guys, they're never going to send me out to another school again. I'll never get to go to any cool stuff. I'll never be trusted to be able to improve the collective. Exactly. And you never want that. Nobody ever wants that.
So he was open to sharing then afterwards, once he understood what was going on.
He did. He would kind of like he would say something, and then he'd kind of give me the eye, like, don't ask, kind of like every now and then he'd be like, yeah, don't. Yeah, exactly. So it tempered me a little bit, but he also was a little more understanding.
Well, I think it's a good point too, in that if we are asking why, that we also have a responsibility to ensure that we're doing it tactfully, so it doesn't come across as confrontational or challenging, that it genuinely comes across as inquisitive. Like, I've got an example. I remember being in a job interview, and it wasn't even like an interview. The guy was interrogating me, and I was so put off. I'm like, I don't even want to work for this guy. and I don't know if he was being that way, if he was in a bad mood, or that was his interview style, or something, or there's just some miscommunication. But it was a huge put off, and I just was no longer interested in working with the guy because he came across like a jerk. So sure. I think it is important that, yes, be inquisitive, but also have some self-awareness as to how you're coming across. And are you being a know-it-all and trying to like get somebody, or are you genuinely curious about what it is you're learning?
And that was probably my takeaway from that school, was like, I just assumed that everybody that was okay. Like, this is how it's done. Like, cause I'm somewhat new, and like, I kind of took away from it. I would say that it kind of curtailed my exuberance for asking questions. It did. I mean, sure. I'm not gonna lie. But what I also did was I made sure that the questions that I needed to ask were pertinent, and that I couldn't find the answers out myself.
Right.
So, there was a give and take there. I kind of, I toned back the volume of questions, and then the questions that I did ask, I made sure that I couldn't answer them myself after
they
that.
were the right ones. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
I want to go back to what you were talking about with your deck of cards.
Yeah.
You had mentioned the four suits, so dry fire, speed, accuracy, and then you said baselines.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with that term. So what are you referring to when you say that?
So baselines is like, the best way to explain it is what is your, what it takes for you to complete a task to standard. So for instance, the way that baselines work is, like, a lot of times people will come up with their own part time. Like, you go online and you see a drill and you say, oh, it's got a 2-second part time. And people feel like, oh, I got to make that 2-second part time. Well, the reality is maybe that part time is not suited for you. So what we have to do is
that's like the best of the best, or the highest
right,
standard,
exactly,
or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, and I was also telling my son, I was like, listen, they did that about 6 times before they finally got it just the way they want to show it on social media. So don't think that was like out of the gate. But what a baseline is like, and I learned this through the fitness industry of sorts, and we started doing this way back in the day. And what it basically amounts to is, let's just take a drill, like a 1-round drill to an 8-inch target from the 7-yard line, right? So what is the time that it takes for you to complete that task, right? Now, a lot of times what happens is the way we do it is that you'll shoot that drill, right? So 1 round from the ready position, have a timer, start the time, or the timer goes, you fire that drill. Whatever the time was, the only way that time counts is if you hit the 8-inch target. Right? If you didn't hit the 8-inch target, then no matter how fast that time was, it doesn't count because you missed.
Nothing counts. Right.
Exactly. 7 repetitions, you'll have 7 times basically. Now you get 3 mulligans. So you're allowed to go up to 10, because if you go past 10, you're no longer evaluating your core skill. You're actually training, right? You've moved past that cold condition when you just walk onto the firing line. What am I capable of? And now you're kind of like warmed up. You're actually training. So 10 repetitions is the max. You get 3 mulligans. So if you miss, let's just say the second shot you fired, you missed, well, you still get, you have 3 mulligans. So you got 2 left in the bank. And the goal is for you to try to shoot as fast as you can guarantee the hits. And that's a mantra that I tell people on the firing line. I don't want you to go fast. I want you to go as fast as you can guarantee the hits. And that's a subtle difference, but it's a major difference on the firing line. And so you'll shoot those 7 baseline times. And what you'll do is you'll take the fastest and the slowest and you'll get rid of them.
Okay.
And then you'll average out the remaining 5. And let's just say that the remaining 5 tells us that, they average out to 2.27 seconds. So 2.27 seconds is the exact amount of time that it takes for you to fire 1 round at the 7-yard line to an 8-inch target. That's exactly how much time it takes for you to do it. And so what we do is we take those baselines and we can flex those baselines. So I tell people that anytime you step up to the firing line, if I put 2.27 seconds on the timer and I hit the button, you need to be able to make that shot, because that's what a baseline is.
That's your baseline. And it sounds like it's individual to you.
Exactly.
Not just the standard across the board.
No, it's that. And that's because like when you go to again, I use a lot of fitness orientations. Like you go to a CrossFit gym, you're probably not going to be able to do RX. You're not doing what the games athletes are doing. There's no way I'm going to be able to do that weight. So I've got to scale it down to my ability. Exactly. So, and some people scale up, some people scale down. It just depends. But what we do with that time, so 2.27 seconds is my kind of it's how I keep myself honest. So I'm going to, the next time I go to the range, I'm going to put 2.27 seconds on the timer and I'm just going to shoot that. And as long as I am making that part time and I'm getting my hits, then it's valid. It's good. And after I've done that for a while, what I will do is I will take that 2.27 seconds and maybe I'll try to fire 2 rounds. If I get, can I actually, get that 2, because I know I can guarantee 1. Yeah, sure. Exactly. And maybe the time is an issue. Maybe there's no way I can get 2 rounds in that 2.27 seconds. So now what I'll do is I'll step back to the 10-yard line. So I move from the 7 to the 10, add a little bit of distance. And then if I feel like, that's still not good enough, 2.27 seconds, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go from an 8-inch target zone to a 6-inch target zone. Can I still make those baselines in that?
A lot of variables you can change here.
It is, but you're working from a known. This is what you're capable of.
It's like a scientific method. You got to have that standard, right?
It's so true. I geek out on stuff like that because metrics drive everything that we do in my training industry, at least.
I've got my notepad here, my battle planner. A lot of the guys that listen know, but that first line right there is that which is measured improves.
So true.
It's like, how can you, whether it's your bank account, your firing speed, your accuracy, your weight, whatever, if you're not measuring it, it's not going to get better. Or even if it does get better, you can't replicate it because you don't know how it improved.
So that's the thing. It's got to be measurable to start with, observable, and then repeatable. And that's what baselines do for you. Is you've measured your performance and it's observable. So I can actually watch you do this and I can say, yep. And then if it's not repeatable, and that's what baselines are all about. It's about your ability. That's why we take that collection of 7, we discard the fastest and the slowest, and we average out the middle ground there because that's what you were able to repeat.
Right.
And once we have that time, now we can use that time to do a lot of things. And what I tell people is like, once you've done that baseline drill, hold on to it for like about, depending on how many times you go to the range and how many rounds you fire, you might hold that for like 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year before you retest.
Mm,
And now let me do this baseline again. Let's see if I've improved, because
right.
hopefully if you have a training regime, there's a goal at the end, which is to improve your performance. So how do I know? Well, I have this known, my baseline for that 1 round drill at the 7. 6 months later, I'm going to do it again. And now instead of 2.27 seconds, I'm like 1.9,
Mm-hmm.
1.90. So clearly I can see the improvement.
The
And
drills are helping you, right?
yes, exactly. And now you're able to track your progress over time, and you're able to actually see what's like, you have a way to measure what's working, what's not working. Like if you try something on the internet and you're like, okay, I'm going to go out and try this baseline drill, or I'm going to go out and do this video, whatever the video had me do. I'll go back and shoot my baseline. Oh, that didn't work. That didn't help. Or yes, it did. I'm awesome. Let's keep going. It just gives you a way to, because without that known, without a start point, you're just spinning your wheels. You really don't
Right.
have any real good place to go.
Right.
So I love doing baselines. They're not easy because, like I said, you got to shoot them cold. You like this. It varies between people that you talk to. I say that you can shoot a baseline every week. Like as long as there's a week, 7 days in between each baseline, you're not. It's not invalid, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you did a baseline on Monday, did another baseline on Wednesday, did another baseline on Friday, you're not really, it's they're too close in the frequency to be genuine. Like they're piggybacking on each other.
Right.
So
Yeah, because you're hopefully in that short of a turnaround, a 24 or 48 hour turnaround, hopefully you'd be able to improve it just because you did it yesterday.
Exactly. That should be, and you're absolutely right. You should.
Right.
So we don't want to measure. What we want to measure is your cold bore performance. What can you do without a warm up? What can you do with that? Because that's the most valuable information. And so if you do a baseline like once a week or more, like once every 2 weeks, whatever it is, you can, and that was just one example. Like you could do a 2-round drill from the 5. You can do a 5-round drill from the 25-yard line.
Mm-hmm.
Baselines are unlimited. You can,
Sure.
the sky is the limit there in that case. And I usually keep about 2 dozen baselines on tap. And so what I'll do is like probably once a quarter for me at this point, because I've documented so many. It's not, like I said, it's not easy to document those baselines, but I've documented them over a decade or more. And I'll just pick one and I'll like go in and I'll just reshoot it. And if it's updated, great. If it's not updated, well, I probably know there's an area that I need to work on. I haven't been working on that.
That's why I like those cards, is because I think it's the same phenomenon when a guy's like, okay, I want to go to the gym, and they're all hopped up the night before, and then they wake up and they're like, yeah, I don't know, because they don't really know what they're gonna do. They don't have a workout. Sounds like you're into CrossFit, which is one of the benefits of CrossFit for the average fitness person, is that you don't have to program your workouts.
Nothing,
you just
man.
go in, there's a WOD, and you do the workout of the day, and you don't have to think about that. And it's the same thing here. Like for me, if I wanted to go out and train, whether it's live or dry fire, I don't know what to do. I don't know. Just, and I'll make something up that is or is not effective.
It's true. And it's like part of the problem that I saw in the industry was lack of planning, lack of like creating a strategy for how to improve.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever fitness, genre you subscribe to, there's usually an inroad to get into a goal. There's a process, right? And so having a training plan is fundamental towards seeing that improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, especially as a new shooter, you really just don't know how to create a training plan. So what I love about those cards, here's another great example. Let's just say you have 100 rounds. So you got 2 boxes of ammo. Each of those cards has a cumulative round count on them. So this card is 20 rounds. This card is 30. This card is 25. And so you can just collect the cards and total them up to 100 rounds. And now you've got a training plan without having to put a lot of thought into it. You just go to the range, you shoot each of these cards, and that's 100 rounds, but not 100 rounds fired kind of recklessly, fired with purpose. You have
with intentionality. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I like that. I want to shift gears.
Go for it.
I want to talk a little bit about philosophy. One of the things that you mentioned, because I want to get into just collective philosophy with the nation. I want to talk a little bit about that, but I also want to talk about your philosophy that you mentioned earlier as to 2 things you mentioned. Keeping your firearms loaded or unloaded, and having them secured under lock and key or combo, or having them out in the open? I'd like to hear your philosophy on those couple of things. And I'm sure there's some variables there, but I would like to hear
Absolutely.
your stance.
So it's a great question, and it's an important question because of what's happening right now in the country. First, the thing that I would say is that you need to know the law. Here in the state of Texas, they consider a child to be anybody under the age of 16. I'm sorry, under the age of 18, so
Okay.
17 and below. And what that means is that if you left a firearm unattended and it was accessible by a child, you would be breaking the law.
Right.
So know the law first. Second is what is the requirement? Like, are you in a war-torn part? Like, are you living in Portland right now? I mean, if you are, maybe you want to probably keep it loaded because there's just some crazy stuff happening. So you got to evaluate your needs. Is the threat high? Is the threat low? If it's high, then the common sense answer would be that I probably want that loaded because that's one less thing that I have to do.
Right.
If it's low, maybe I don't need it loaded. I'm not saying that you couldn't still have it loaded, but maybe you don't really have a real need to load it. Then after that, we talk about locked or, out in the open, unlocked. Again, know the law. If you have small children or if children visit your home, then it's probably not a good idea to keep it unlocked. You definitely want to keep it secure. And these days, you'd be surprised at some of the new lock boxes that are out there. They've got some super sophisticated with all sorts of features on them, like literally, everything from the biometric thumbprint to
sure.
There's one that you can actually operate off of your phone. You can actually hit a button on your phone and unlock it for a family member or whatnot. They have motion sensors and lights and all sorts of stuff in there. So I mean, they've gotten pretty sophisticated with some of these lock boxes. So like, and they're not that pricey. And to me, being able to secure the firearm is probably especially for all of the new firearms owners that are out there right now, that's probably weighing heavy on their mind. They brought a gun into their home. They're a little nervous about that. And so the best thing that they could do is secure the firearm in a way that makes them feel comfortable with their current situation that they have, whether they have children or no children.
And also being able to look, I mean, that's important for sure. But then when you need it, you have to be able to access it. So there's
that was
this
going to be the second
balancing
thing.
act of, is like,
yeah, exactly.
And so I think that's even something you probably ought to consider training as well. Is like, you're at 2 a.m.
That was going to be,
you hear somebody breaking into your house. Train that.
So the last part to the commentary was going to be, whatever method, like let's just say you keep it unloaded. Well, you need to practice how to charge the weapon to get it into operational readiness. That needs to be part of your routine. If you have a lockbox, you need to practice how to open the lockbox in a very quick manner. And you might want to practice it not just in daytime, but at night. Most of the, if you're looking at a home invasion, there's not, like, I'm not saying that time is not critical, but it's not like you're out in the open mano a mano with another person. You generally have some sort of barrier between you and like your front door or your bedroom door or something that buys you enough time to actually access said firearm. If the firearm is located next to the bed, that makes it a little bit easier. If it's located in a master closet, that's a little bit more challenging. So what we talk about is like, rehearse this, like how long will it take for you to get from your bed to the master closet to get the firearm and then get out? And at least what we call strong pointing, which is, you use the best, master bedroom door, excuse me, as like your threshold. Like, I'm not going to, like, I don't have a need or reason to go out into my home to inspect to see what happened. I heard the glass breaking. I heard voices outside there. The first thing I'm doing is probably breaking out that firearm and holding security, if you will, on the door and calling the police.
Right.
They're much more equipped. They're much better equipped to go ahead and manage that. But let's just say you're in Portland where like response time was like 90 minutes. So clearly that's not going to work for you. So
it's on you. Yep, it's on you.
Yeah, exactly. You got to value all of this. That's why I'm saying you got to really take in the big picture and understand what are some of these variables that I need to have a plan for. Like, maybe I call the police, at least notify them that I have, intruders in my home, and, what's their advice? If the police tell me, we won't be there for 90 minutes. Okay, I'm on my own.
Well, I think in addition to that, and so this goes back to what we were saying earlier, where people think just because they have a gun, they're protected. It's like, like you might want to have some other layers in there.
So true.
Dogs, for example. Okay, if I'm not going to rely on my dog to stop an intruder, but it's going to slow one down, even if it's
Oh
just
yeah.
barking, right?
Mm,
So then, and then you have alarm systems. Even if it's just a localized alarm system where it's not going somewhere, just being able to hit a siren and that thing come on, that's going to deter a lot of people from entering into your house and buys
it's
you some
true.
time should you need to escalate the situation.
It's so true. That, I mean, all sorts of things. Like there's a lot of things that you can do to what we call harden your home for to kind of help reduce the possibility. Everything from motion sensing lights on the outside, cleaning up the vegetation around your home. Nowadays you can go down to Best Buy or even Target and buy do-it-yourself security camera systems that allow you to
Right.
monitor inside, outside. Like you said, a pet, an animal, a dog, they're great. I love the siren. I think the siren is a good thing. You put that siren outside in the main common area because that thing is loud and it
Right.
hurts. That's
Right.
actually, you're out there. It's painful. It's like a smoke detector going off in the middle of the night when you're asleep. That's like uncomfortable.
Yeah, you don't want anything to do with that.
No. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And, like the bottom line is that you have to really evaluate your situation. Like, am I in an apartment complex or am I in a home? And, you also have to evaluate your situation. Do I have children? Like if I had children, most home, the structural layout of most homes puts the kids' bedrooms on the opposite side of the master bedroom. So if somebody were to break in through the front door, then you're pretty much committed to trying to at least get to your children's room so that you can at least protect, at least know that you have your family all on one side of the house. So you
Mm-hmm.
might have to move from your master bedroom to the kids' room and strong point there as opposed to strong point in your master bedroom. Like if you live on the second deck or the second floor, that's awesome. You got the stairwell. All you got to do is just move to the stairwell and hold the stairwell. Let them, I hate to say it, but you let them ramsack the first deck and you just hold the stairs. And if they,
Right.
if they pursue up the stairs, it's a pretty bad situation because you've got the high ground, you've got a lot of other things working for you. So
High ground, you've got the dark, you got home field advantage.
oh
Bring it
yeah,
on.
you got it
Let's
all.
do this.
Yeah. So, and home defense is one of these things that's it's a constantly evolving, like anything else. It's constantly evolving, right? Technology is evolving. We got these cool things like the lock boxes that are, super advanced. We got security systems, do-it-yourself type that you don't have to rely on a security system to come out there. I mean, I do think it's valuable to have a like at least something, and one of the simplest things that we talk about is like hardening your front door. Like if you can harden your front door, most of the time you're looking at like 3/4 inch long screws.
Put
If you can
longer
change
screws
those,
in there.
yeah, if you can change those, if you haven't installed a deadbolt, man, that's number one. I don't know why you wouldn't have a deadbolt on your front and back door. Things like that are super important. Probably one of the scarier things is how do you handle an unsolicited knock at the door, right?
Mm.
And like I have had a lot of people experience this where it's late at night. Well, let's not say it's late. Let's say it's 8:00. So that's kind of like, all right, nobody should really be coming to my house at 8:00.
Right.
Like you need to establish what do you consider to be appropriate versus not appropriate. And then you also have, if you have kids, you really have to be careful about this because you need to make sure that the children know that once it's dark, you don't open the door anymore.
Yeah.
That's mom and dad's job. Mom and dad will go and open the door. Kids don't open the door at nighttime hours. Now they probably shouldn't open the door anyhow, but at least
that's
at
what
night.
I tell my kids. There's no reason one of my children should ever open the door for anybody.
Exactly. And then, so if it's unsolicited, my recommendation is like turn on the outside lights, try to view who it is through windows. Peepholes are great, but I try to get a different viewpoint from like a side window or a window that has a vantage point to the door there so you can see who's out there. Look and see the numbers, like how many people are out there. If there's more than one, there's really not a reason for you to probably, open the door. Because once you crack the threshold of your door, you make it really hard to defend.
Right.
Like once you've opened that door, because the door pushes in, it's a lot harder for you to stop versus, keeping the door closed. And there's nothing wrong with talking to somebody through the door. You can ask questions like, who is it? And what do you want? And come back during the day or whatever the case might be. And the thing that I tell people is the reason why I'm providing those commands or those instructions is I want to see how they react. So if, for instance, if I yell through the door, who is it? And I get like some, oh, it's Bob. Bob
Right.
who? Bob, that tells me right away that I'm not going to open the door.
Exactly. Yep.
Now
Exactly.
if it's like, hey, it's George, your neighbor, I'm locked out of the house. Can I, blah, 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 blah. That's a little different, but if they don't pass that first kind of like interrogative question, who is it? That's probably all you need to know to say, I'm not opening this door,
Exactly.
and then you just, just go back to what you were doing, because that's all you have to do. You don't have to stay there and talk to them through the door. Once you feel like, okay, that's it, I'm done. Hey, that's it. Good night. Have a good night. And
Right.
go back to whatever you're doing.
I think people believe they're obligated to answer the phone and open the door. It's like, you're not obligated to operate on somebody else's schedule or their time or their desires.
So true. Like, one of the hardest thing is to say no.
Yes.
Right. And I tell people that you have to become, it's uncomfortable, especially as humans, good natured humans. It's very hard for us to say no. Nobody wants to say no. Like, particularly women. Like, there's a great book. It's a fantastic book I recommend just about everybody, not just women, read, which is Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear.
Oh, The Gift of Fear. Right. Sure.
Love that book. And there was a chapter devoted to this, the ability to say no. And like, for me, like, being able, like, I'm a nice guy and I have no problems, helping out where I can, but I make that choice on my own. I'm not going to be forced to help somebody because that's what they're trying to get me to do.
Exactly.
So like, that means you have to get comfortable saying no. Somebody walks up to you and asks you, what time is it? It seems like it's a very benign question, but a lot of times what precedes a sucker punch or a tackle or a haymaker is a distraction.
Right.
And so while you're looking at your watch to see what time it is, all of a sudden, that's when the guy cold cocks you. That's when he tackles you. That's when whatever. And you've lost the initiative in that sense. So, I tell people, it's like, hey, if you feel uncomfortable, then respect that.
Right.
Respect that instinct that you have, and tell
one thing
whoever
that,
it is.
Well, I was going to say, one thing that I've learned or done in the past is just a disruption, right? They're trying to disrupt you, so you disrupt them. So I was in Vegas, and my son and I had rented this exotic car just because I wanted to have some fun with him. And so we did this, and we pulled into the gas station, and I noticed this guy who, maybe he was homeless, or he just didn't look clean. There was something off, right? So he starts walking directly towards me. He gets about 15 yards away, and he was looking at me. I said, "Stop." And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "I wanted to ask for some food." I said, "That's fine. You stop right there and you go ahead and ask whatever it is you need." Can you give me some money? I need some food. I said, "No, I won't give you money, but if you go put something up on the register in the gas station of food, I will pay for it for you."
Nice.
And sure enough, and it ended up working out. Probably that's all he needed. But I'm not willing to risk, especially with my son there, whether or not he's wanting to steal the car or injure me or hurt my son. I'm not playing that game. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that because they're worried about hurting people's feelings.
Yes,
I don't give a shit about your feelings. I care about my life and the livelihood of and well-being of my son at the time.
I'm telling you, it's a hard thing to deal with, because at our core, we are nice people. We're good natured, and people will take advantage of that. And it's unfortunate that that's where we've evolved as a culture, as a community, as a society. But that's the truth. You have to accept it. And I tell people that all the time. It's like, creating your own tape loop. Like, that's a great example. Something short and sweet. Stop. Mm-hmm. Don't come any closer. Mine is like, if somebody asks me, what time is it? Can I have some money for food? Can you buy me this? My response is always the same. No, thank you. No. And thank you. Like, no, pause, thank you. And that's like a dismissive thank you. Like,
yep,
that's it.
It's
the conversation.
Over. It's done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's important that you not engage, because that's the next step that they will look for, is to create the confrontation through conversation kind of thing. And so my recommendation is to break away like you did. It was good. It was an excellent example. It was very well thought out and easy, right? And it maintained your proximity to your kid without being exposed to an unknown. Like a lot of times what I tell people is, like, you're looking over here, you're focused on what's happening here, and you don't see what's happening here. You don't
Right.
understand that there's something else right here that they're working in, like team effort, or there's more than one, or you're just so focused on that person that you don't see the bigger picture, what's around you. So something
Mm-hmm.
like stop and having them stay at a comfortable distance away from you, great, it's awesome.
Right.
Because here's the thing: anytime, just like with that scenario at the door, right? If I ask him who is it, and I get any kind of not, if I don't get the answer I'm looking for, I know at that point they're non-compliant. And
Mm-hmm.
once I know that somebody's non-compliant, I'm not going to waste my time trying to encourage them to become compliant. I'm disengaging at that moment. There's no
Right.
point in me doing anything at that point. It's like, well, I need
Yeah,
to
it's
do
not
what's
like they're going to start engaging in some sort of intellectually honest, discussion with you,
exactly,
or hash this scenario out. Like they've already
exactly,
proven they're not willing to go down that route.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Well, Jeff, this has been fascinating. I like this stuff. I could talk about this stuff all day
Oh
long. It's
yeah,
very
me
important,
too.
for men to consider, just not just firearms, but some of the scenarios that we're talking about now to keep yourself and the people that you love safe. Yeah, I'm sure we could talk about being safe in vehicles, which is now something that's even more important than it ever
Oh
was.
goodness,
But I'm going to encourage the guys to go connect with you and learn more about what you're doing, because
that would be
just
awesome.
for the sake of time.
I hear you. I love it, and you're right. I could do the same thing. I geek out on this stuff, so it's a great format to introduce the subject, and then the folks can kind of pursue things on their own.
Yeah. Do you want to let the guys know? I mean, we talked a lot about that deck of cards, but I know you've got other programs, you've got other courses, and you've got other materials. So where do those guys go to get access to that stuff?
Great question as well. So one thing I want to put out is for a lot of the new gun owners or folks that are just kind of wading into this industry, a helpful format is I partnered with Brownells. Brownells is a very well known, well respected group within the industry to do a video series for the first time gun owner, new purchaser, called Daily Defense. So you can see that off of my YouTube channel, off of Brownell's YouTube channel. But it's really important as far as like breaking the ice for a lot of people, like giving them some material to start to digest and get them
Mm-hmm.
comfortable moving forward. So that would be one big thing that I would put out there. I totally spaced that during the conversation. There's a lot of training classes that folks can look. We travel all over the country doing training classes, all over the place. We're a little short this year, not this year, but this time of year, because we do a lot of our government classes at the end of the year.
Mm.
So there's only like one or two open enrollment classes still. Folks can go to my website to check out the schedule. The best thing to do is actually go to the website because all my social media links are there. So
Right.
tridentconcepts.com is the website. You can find out where you can go to our pro shop to get the training cards. You can go to our class schedule to see what other classes we have available. So a couple more, there's also all the blogs. Like I think I'm up to about 600 plus blogs
Wow.
on the website. Yeah. So if you
Yeah,
had
you
a
got a lot of
question,
content over there.
yeah, if you had a question, you can go and do a search and probably find the answer pretty easily. And then of course there's the YouTube channel where you can watch a lot of videos.
Excellent. Well, we'll sync it all up for the guys. Hey, I just want to tell you, I really appreciate you. I mean, your service
Yeah.
to the country as a SEAL, what you're doing now, and equipping people with what they need to be able to protect themselves is important. And I value what you're doing, and really appreciate your time joining us.
It was my pleasure. It was great to get to know you. I really appreciate it. I look forward to watching your content develop over time.
Thanks, Jeff.
My pleasure.